That's so nice of you. Yes, I will present some results that we found in a project that was done in Erasmus+. It was called Providing Perspectives Preventing Violence. And it was launched in a period of time when there was a lot of talk about de-radicalization. So what is youth work's task of de-radicalization without really providing a lot of information about what kind of radical behavior should be prevented, what should really be an alternative to that. So that was the ideas. At the same time, I was involved in the expert group, in the European Union expert group on the role of youth work to prevent marginalization and radicalization into violent extremism. I always like these names. They are so short and so easy and really catchy. Normally, everybody feels immediately driven into that. So, okay, I want to talk a little bit about this project. It was run by a youth work organization in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, and there were other countries involved. It was Germany, it was Austria, it was Croatia, United Kingdom, and PAUI, so the umbrella organization, Professional Open Youth Work in Europe. From all the other countries, there were umbrella organizations, representative organizations of open youth work, professional open youth work. So we are not talking here about youth organizations. I want to make this clear because this approach is different. The topic was about the contribution of youth work in preventing violence, but also violent radicalization or radicalization into violence, into violent extremism. And the idea behind the project was to develop support for youth workers if they need some support. If they are asked to say, work on this topic, then you should also say, what kind of support would you need to work on that? Yeah? And our idea was to develop these support structures, and that could be going on for that. That was not my part of the project. I was involved to find some background information first and then to work with the youth workers in focus groups especially. Okay, so when we started, we started about trying to find out a little bit more about what are we talking about. So when we talk about extremism, do we have the same picture on that? It was very strongly connected to religious fundamentalism. Well, to one kind of religious fundamentalism, because we are never looking at Catholic fundamentalism. Yeah? We are not looking at the orthodoxy of the Balkans. That's not important, and it's very fundamental, I have to say, but we are not caring about that. Yeah? So we are talking about religious fundamentalism, and we are talking about left-wing or right-wing extremism, and then we are talking about radicalism. And Anja was yesterday already pointing to the fact that radicalism per se is not branded as bad. Yeah, you cannot just say that. But in our perception, so 3 to 5 years ago, in the perception of the public, it was branded as negative. Every kind of radical behavior was negative. And the problem that came up very soon was that a lot of youth workers were more in line with the radical ideas of the young people than with trying to get them away from them. Yeah? So this was one of the main challenges. So we started with that, and we're trying to find a lot of information about this topic, trying to collect on the national levels different forms of information, what they would use for training youth workers, for working together in networks. Yeah? And for example, we had some definitions of that. This was from the Salto resource pack for youth workers. So we also had a lot of information that was coming up and popping up at that time. We had this contribution of youth work by the EU expert group. We had a Salto resource pack. We had the Terra toolkit. So a lot of things were developed. And one of them, for example, was violent extremism refers to the beliefs and actions of people who support or use ideologically motivated violence to achieve radical ideological, religious and political views, which is already quite something to say, okay, we know what we want to do. We have done a differentiation, left-wing, right-wing, religious motivated violence, issue-based violence, like abortion or homosexuality, or maybe animal rights, I don't know. So you have different forms of that, but we do not have a definition of violence. Yeah? So what kind of violence are we talking about? Is it offending other people? Or is it beating them up on the street? Is it burning down some houses where nobody got injured? What is it? We don't find that inside here. So we also were looking at, when we talk about prevention, it's always about trying really to prevent something, so we have to start at the beginning. So we were looking also at a collection of information about what are the forms, or what are the, what should I say, in the explanations maybe, yeah, explanations, reasons for becoming a radical. Yeah? And there we can see two main approaches. The one is a macro level approach, the other one is a micro level approach. These were the main drivers. On the micro level, you have the personal development, you have the needs of the young person, you have the personal experience of discrimination, you have the family, that's also counted to the micro level still. So these are things that you have. And then on macro level, you have grievance, you have feelings of revenge, you have big political developments about the Western European world against the Islam per se, against the Arabic world, or you also have main things about alienation of whole groups of young people of society. That also would be macro level explanations that explains why people are going into that field. But all of that are very short, because we say we find young people coming out of broken families and having a bad school education and still don't become radical or extremists. Or on the other side, not everybody coming from a migrant family in Germany becomes radical just because they are discriminated. So both of these explanations do not really cover it. And then was a third, I would even say it was a fashion, going for this meso level, which focuses very strongly on the cultural approach about that. So saying, radicalization is something that is needed for young people. You have to be different than something else. You want to change something. Yeah? And very often, especially in liberal societies, you have to be extreme, to be noted, to be different. Yeah? And you were talking about the pop jihad and things like that. You were also finding a lot of explanations about the role of music getting, for example, far right-wing people into the field. So with right-wing rock music, for example. And we also had a look at these very complex problem, multidimensional nature of pull and push factors. Alina was yesterday talking about them already, but there are some, when you take a look at the development of the UNDP, which is quite interesting. When we had our Croatian partners, yeah, they used a lot of information coming from the UN, and all the others were using information coming from the European Union or from the Council of Europe. That's really interesting to have this ex-Yugoslavian countries focusing on UN development and the others just ignoring them. Europe is big enough for us. That's quite an interesting thing. But when you see, we have here economic exclusion, we have the role of global and regional geopolitics, or we have the weak legitimacy of the state, failing security. So these are things that are really on the high level. And youth work, can youth work intervene with that? You know, this was the question. On the other side, you have the individual factors and you have the socialization factors, and this leads to radicalization. But to become a violent extremist, it also needs this part of active recruitment. And that was the idea, especially formulated in the SALTO resource pack, but also in the expert group on the European Union level. It says it is about this individual and emotional psychological factors that youth work can do something, and talking about socialization. But we cannot really focus on that, on youth work. So we are talking about the family. We are talking very strongly about the feeling of belonging that young people think. They are telling, especially with right-wing movements, saying that was the first time that I felt accepted. You know, this is the first time that I can talk to like-minded people, which is quite interesting because when we are talking about Muslim fundamentalists in Vienna, we had a research going on by a colleague done in youth centers, and they found out that a quarter of the young people, of the Muslim young people visiting the youth centers are showing tendencies to anti-democratic behavior and extremist behavior. But what was also clear is they were still in the youth centers. They still had contact to the youth workers, and they were in the reach of youth workers. Howard was mentioning it yesterday with the summing up of the day before, saying it is about reach. Do we really reach those young people that are in danger to becoming extremists? So this feeling of belonging is something that searching for an identity, belonging to a group, that was seen as the main thing. And here just some theories about stages of radicalization. I don't want to go into that, but this is one that leads to terrorism. Yeah, this is from Macaulay and Moskalenko, with 12 steps that leads into radicalization of masses and going into terroristic attacks, into martyrdom. Yeah? And other things would be, we also find things like that on the Stop Jihadism from the French government that found its way into the teacher's handbook of the UN to say how to find out when somebody is in danger to become an extremist for the Islam. And there are things like we have sudden breaks with the family and long-standing friendship, which is very unclear for growing up. I mean, this is something that never happens with young people, that they try to find a new form of belonging, or drop out of school, and conflicts with school also never happens. Yeah. Changes of attitudes and behaviors towards other. So we have to be very careful what's out there as well. Yeah, and I wouldn't say that I'm very happy with all the results that we have in our handout that was produced by the EU expert group, because they would also question 2 or 3 things that we presented then in the end. Yeah? Because it's always a reduction. And it always has to be transformed into the place where we are working. So, for the EU expert group, we had a 3-level approach that was agreed on in the end. It was the generic level and the targeted prevention and the indicated prevention. And the generic level was going on, we call it also primary prevention. It is for all young people and trying to really create this situation for young people to feel at home in the youth work. And that's not only something that can be adapted to professional open youth work on the municipality level. That can also be done in the youth work of youth organization. The targeted prevention aims already at young people who show tendencies towards extremist behavior. Yeah? They are interested in anti-democratic and extremist ideologies. And the indicated prevention is for those people who are really on the track going down the slope. Yeah? Most youth work experts that were included in this project said this work should only be provided by experts of exit programs and only specially trained youth workers. So it's not a thing that just youth work does. But all the two others saying, this is what youth work is doing all the time. This is about self-confidence of the young person, development of a identity supporting young people in their development. A similar approach can be found in the Salto Resource Pack. So the key elements here is seen as the civic youth work, and you find here 7 steps that leads to that, and that are elements of that, and you can all read that in this resource packages that are to be found at the Salto page, for example. So this was the material that was found for the background, and that should be in a depository available for all youth workers. What the next step parallel was now to go and ask youth workers in the different countries what is their experience. And here is a sample description to see how, that you just can see what culture is behind that thing. So we have a lot of answers from Austria and from Croatia, and we have only altogether, we have from England, we have 25 answers. Yeah? So you cannot really say that this is the same level as the answers from Austria, but you will see then I did some percentages of that. It's ridiculous to show it, just to have it in mind. Yeah? This is not a very good sample. It was a convenient sample that we used. It was an online research. And they are also working in different regions. They are in the inner district of a big city up to a rural location, whatever that means. There are different descriptions about it, but that does not mean that the understanding of the youth worker filling in the questionnaire is the same as the scientific definition of big city. Okay, so what were they doing? 2/3 of the people answered they were doing youth center work. Yeah? You have also outreach youth work, but you also have street work or mobile youth work that does not have a youth center in the back. Yeah? You have 5%, a fifth of the people are saying they are doing also school social work, and other opportunities are also there. What are the target groups? We see very strongly that the main group is 15 to 19-year-olds. It's girls and boys. We have then on the regular users, we have then the age groups of 20 to 24 and 10 to 14, and these are the 5 main groups. And then we see when we ask what are regular users, they would say it's socioeconomic disadvantaged is almost as strong as the other groups, but we do not see that as the main user groups when you ask them at that. And this also gives an opinion about who are we talking to when youth workers are here. We see here the different forms of youth work they are using, open work, information counseling on the third part. Young people are co-designing and co-creating, so participation of the young people in developing the programs, non-formal and informal learnings. Yeah, but down there, interactive digital youth work, when we think about what we heard yesterday, it might be quite interesting. There's only about 5% of the youth workers saying we are involved in that. So there's definitely a room for development for going into this direction. The same goes with media pedagogy. Yeah? We have 11% of the people saying that's one of our main approaches that we do here. Up to that, we did not ask about what is the idea of extreme behavior. But what we said else is what are aims of youth work. And the first answer, and almost for 3/4 of the people, it's support the personal development and support them in self-confidence development. That's the most important thing. Then we had one formulation, stabilization of the young person, where the Austrians said, yeah, it's clear what we mean. Whereas the Croatians said, what the hell should that be? Yeah. So we also see the different traditions about what is understood with the different things that explains it, that it's not that high. We had on the third place the provision of leisure time activities. And everything else is then really going down. We have for the last part health promotion, for example. That's the least what they see as the aim of youth work. Here we asked about 5 pieces. You can choose between 5 of the different aims, yeah, just for those. And this is one of my favorites when we asked about, we were talking yesterday, Alina was saying for the prevention we need a multi-agency approach. And we asked here about where are you, with which other agencies are you networking? And what we learned here is on the first place it's school. Almost everybody is working somehow with school. On the second and third is NGOs and youth welfare. And then you have police. And police is something that where you can really see a cultural difference between the countries. Yeah? Working with the police is different. For example, here in Austria, you see on the first place schools, and then you have youth welfare very strong, but police is a little bit more than 50%. In Germany, it's almost a no-go, yeah, to go and working and networking with the police. By the way, this was done in the region of Brandenburg. There were the most people connected coming out of that field. That might also be a reason where you do that. I don't know, maybe in Bavaria it's more common to work with the police. In Croatia, you're working with schools and youth NGOs, but there is everything else is forget. Yeah? And in England and in the Netherlands, you have a clear orientation of networking with the police. And still we did not ask about, are you talking about extremism? Yeah? This is just a natural form of working in the field. It still is not reacting on me. This was a question, this is quite interesting because we see also here a different form of if young people approaches you, if a young person approaches you and asks, what is this? What is this going on with this extremism? What is this about nationalism? How would you react? Yeah? And we said we would strongly support him we would never support him to find information. And you see there's a complete difference. For example, in Croatia, there's 4 out of 10 would say they would never support any information about nationalism. Yeah? And in England, you have nobody who would say, I would never do that. Yeah? So complete different approach and complete different understanding about this topic. Coming now to the support that is needed. And we see a lot of people are just unsure. Do they really need more support? They feel quite okay with what they have already. So we see in the Netherlands, 20% would say no more support is needed. We are well off. We know what to do and how to deal with the topic. But in some other countries, like in Germany, it's 8%. In England, as it said, it was not a lot of people asked here, but 6% would be say, no, I'm well off, I know everything. And in Germany, almost half of the people that participated said, I'm not sure if I need more. Because they cannot say That's my interpretation. It would be, it makes a difference if we want to know, do we need more support on working with right-wing extremists, or with left-wing extremists, or with fundamentalists? You know, that makes a difference. Yeah, you cannot just say, I need more support. And what do they want to have? And here it was quite interesting, because with these results we went into focus groups. How should we create your support structures? What you need? And we see in total it is about a real training program that they want to have, to work with that. But the training, going a step further, is already saying, what should we do? It's also about methods. It's not about information only about why do young people become radical. It's also about how to approach them. Seminars on the second, some resources and information on the third, and then going down. What's also quite interesting, we have a strong orientation on exchange programs or job shadowing, to learn how do you do it. But we see also differences between the countries. For example, in Serbia, you have a very strong orientation on really going on a training, and they also say education program. By the way, this other is going into that direction. And for Croatia, for example, you have the second highest almost is the exchange programs, also is in the Netherlands. It's very important. So we were going to the focus groups with a lot of information, and we wanted to learn a bit more. What were the biggest challenges now seen in youth work? And this was the result that we got not only in the focus groups, but also in the quantitative. We said, what are we really facing nowadays is violence. We have an increase in violence, and there we have also descriptions. We have an increase in violent behavior, starting with offensive behavior in between the groups in our youth center, but it's also about growing prejudice and being very, very offensive, verbally offensive against these groups, especially homosexuals and women. So it's, as we saw yesterday strongly with the right-wing memes, they are very strongly anti-feminist, and this, the way, goes in the same part here. And here are some quotes. When we ask about what do you see as extreme, what is extremism or radicalism, but what is extreme? And then we have examples like many have prejudice against other people and become very aggressive. Sometimes my hair stands up. It was a German. I never have this feeling that my hair stands up. But when I hear what they say, they are really shocked. Youth workers are shocked. They have a moral problem to work with that. They really think that's not possible to do that. What is also interesting is young people today find resorting to violence is actually taking care for themselves, because the world is so violent and I have to defend myself. So you cannot just say, okay, let's talk about it. You have to act violent yourself. Or we are living in an extreme society, so almost everything has to be extreme today. Every behavior that triggers any reaction of friends or of youth workers has to be extreme, because else nobody's reacting on you anymore, which is quite interesting. So when we think about that, so what can youth work really do? Because we are working on the individual level, we are working on the group level here, but in reality it's an extreme society. So how many can we really reach to work with? And we were also talking about radicalism and extremism. So there is no clear definition in the working surrounding of the youth workers, and very often they don't see even a discrimination about that. They don't make a difference. For them it's very often the same, because it's meant in the same sentence by policymakers very often, and they say it's their task to do it. What we find is things very, very subjective. For me, radicalism sounds more positive, because it wants to change from the root. So it's not about what it really means, it sounds so nice. It's good. But extremism, no, that's not. So this is exactly opposite of me. I reckon radicalism always accepts violence as means, which is against the now accepted definition of radicalism and extremism. Extremism tends to accept violence and radicalism not. But that's understood like that. So we have to be very careful when we work about that. And what could be reactions of youth work? How do they react on extreme behavior? What we learned from the quantitative research, almost in all the countries, the people were saying, we work and intervene immediately, and we work on a face-to-face basis. So they are working with the offender, which is the clear message of them. We are talking about why do you do that, and this is unacceptable behavior. And work with that. We did find out of this 300 answers that we got, we found 2 or 3 that say we make it a topic in our group work. Yeah? This is a complete different approach, and I guess there are big differences between youth organizations, how they would deal with things like that, and communal municipal youth work. We talk about it, you have to challenge the views of the young person. Often they say something to provoke, and you have to stay in the dialogue, independent how disgusted you are. Yeah? This is the main message. So we keep the dialogue on the level. It's an accepting approach. It's, I still accept you as the person, but I do not accept your ideology or your point of view. I don't know if this is always so easy, but that's another thing. Yeah, this is the thing that we learned about. And what kinds of support would you need? This comes strongly from Austria, because here we have. They were very outspoken about it, what they want and what they don't want. And they say, no, we don't need anything, we got everything. But what they had is, they had special trainings, they had a lot of information about that topic of extremism, which was about Islam, which was about fundamentalism. And then they said, yeah, okay, we are doing the same thing like always, but now I understand why young people are turning into these ways. I would go on a training. I think most important is the information about other cultures, customs, slangs, and subcultures. So it's more about learning. It's not about the methods. It's more about learning about what is there and understanding and reflecting about it. And when you say, okay, but what about when you have no idea of that? Yeah? First, we need information on what's behind a certain trend. And why do young people go for that? And the rest is we can use our methods. But another thing that we learned, and this is very important, another thing is, if we want to have a training or a seminar, it would be great to do it inside our organization, so we can talk about the certain cases. And everybody can exchange about this situation that we find here. They even said, we want to go on a job exchange. It's quite nice to have that, job shadowing approach. But when you come back, you never tell to your colleagues. Yeah? You're coming back and you know, but it never reaches somebody else. Maybe sometimes in the first week you're talking about how great it was and what you learned, but you never get it implemented. So what would be the real idea is, let's close this thing for 1 week, and the whole group goes for a job shadowing experience to another youth center, to learn about another approach. And I think this is something that we should really consider, because this transferability of knowledge is not guaranteed. If we train one person, it does not really get to the whole structure of people. And now I'm almost at the end, and I wanted there are some other examples. What is also quite interesting, we are not talking here about youth and about young people. These are adults, yeah, and they have leaving my city for a longer time. It's a problem for me. It's not only about the work, it's about my family. Yeah, it's a single mother. Who takes care of my children? So it's not so easy to see that anymore. We can talk about Erasmus Plus projects, maybe about childcare at home that should be supported somehow. And what we were also doing was we were collecting examples, models of good practice, and one that was brought up in Austria, I want to show you in the end. I put it in the presentation only after we learned yesterday about online stuff, and let's see if it works. So what we see here is a video that was produced from a group of youth workers and experts from the field of Islamic fundamentalism and religious researchers, political scientists, and together with young people that experienced radicalization. Some of them were imprisoned, and they made the story of one person, of Jamal al-Khatib. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ich bin Jamal al-Khatib und lebe seit 16 Jahren in Österreich. In meiner Heimat war Krieg, weshalb ist meine Familie hergekommen. Aber auch hier war mein Leben bisher alles andere als friedlich. Ich habe vieles gesehen und erlebt, auch viel Scheiße gebaut. Ich habe gesehen, dass einige meiner Freunde für Donau in den Krieg gezogen sind. Die meisten sind mittlerweile gestorben. Auch ich habe mit den Gedanken gespielt, nach Syrien zu gehen, um gegen Assad zu kämpfen. Im Fernsehen zeigen sie, dass sich immer noch Menschen im islamischen Staat anschließen, die sterben und andere unschuldige Menschen mit ihnen hochreißen. Mittlerweile glaube ich nicht mehr, dass das der richtige Weg ist. Ich war im Gefängnis und hatte viel Zeit, um die Gedanken zu machen. Jetzt bin ich frei und habe euch eine Geschichte zu erzählen. Meine Geschichte. Ich habe Freunde, die mir helfen, meine Gedanken zu äußern.
So what is interesting about that is that we do see here this video, and that should be a video like young people are influenced by these kinds of small propaganda videos. But the interesting thing is that youth workers are reacting on comments. They have a team that is online for 24 hours a day and was reacting in under 1 hour to any comment that was happening. And that was maybe an approach that could be done. It was a project that ran, as you can imagine, not for a very long time. But it was quite interesting because, honestly, I doubt that a lot of the young people were really reached that would normally see this kind of videos. But who were reached were recruiters. Who were reached were young other influencers that wanted to reach young people, and there was a discussion going on. And we were talking yesterday about on one of the tables about that, how that could influence maybe this behavior of that. And we have now the production of a second round of the videos when they are coming back now and how they integrate into the society. Okay, that was it from my part of view. Thank you very much.